Last week we told you about the controversial screening of the documentary 10 Conditions of Love, focusing on the Uyghur people and businesswoman Rabia Kadir. China had wanted the movie banned, claiming Kadir is nothing more than a terrorist, but Australia's relationship with Beijing is being tested this week, with the government granting Kadir a visa.
So is this going to anger Beijing? Well, Sky News political editor David Spears joins us with more in the studio right now. David, good morning again to you. Now, is the government risking a backlash from China by allowing this visit, a controversial visit, to go ahead?
Oh, it certainly is, but you've got to say the Australian government and Western democracies do take a position of free speech, and you can't stop someone if there's no evidence that they're guilty of a criminal offence from coming to the country and speaking publicly. The problem is China has a very different perspective on these things and don't understand really why the Australian government would allow this to happen when it will be seen as such an offence to a country that's supposed to be a friend, Beijing. Now, someone who has supported the visa application of Rabia Kadir to come to Australia is the Labor backbencher Michael Danby, and he joins us from Melbourne. Mr Danby, thank you for joining us. Now, China says that Rabia Kadir is a criminal, a terrorist, and that her group is responsible for the deaths of some 200 people in the Xinjiang province in China's northwest. So can you understand the sensitivity in Beijing over this visit?
Well, Rabia Kadir is a sort of a devil to the authorities in Beijing, but she was Chinese Businesswoman of the Year 10 years ago, before her current incarnation. And to describe her as an Al-Qaeda terrorist or an Al-Qaeda linked terrorist is a blatant manipulation, in my view, designed to excite people in Western countries like Australia against her. It's just nonsense. I've been into her background in great detail. I wouldn't be supporting her ability to open the Melbourne Film Festival with the film about her made by an Australian, unless it was clear to me that she was a Democrat.
Well, yes, a Democrat in your eyes, but as I say, in China's eyes, a terrorist now, given her role as the exiled Uyghur leader. Is there a danger, do you think, of any potential consequences in China for the case of detained Australian businessman Stern Hu over this particular visit?
Well, we have to be very proud of the fact, as you noted in your introduction, that the Australian government says that free speech applies here in Australia. We can't let our foreign policy, indeed the arrest of Mr Stern Hu, influence other aspects of Australian policy, because if we did, we just open ourselves up to further arm twisting on other issues. I mean, the Dalai Lama's coming to Australia later this year. If China arrested 10 other Australian businessmen to prevent him coming, would we appease them by doing that? I don't think so. I think the Australian government wants good relations with China. I certainly support good relations with China. We don't see that province as in any way not part of China. We don't necessarily support views for independence, but we do support the right of a woman who was Chinese Businesswoman of the Year to have her film shown at the Melbourne International Film Festival, and I'll be quite happily speaking there to say, in my view, that she's a Democrat and that Australia has free speech.
But from what you know of China and how it works, the control it has over the legal system and the concerns it has over this case, do you think there is the potential for some adverse consequences for Stern Hu?
David, there's only potential if Australia shows any sign of weakness. I recently looked at the spot market price for iron ore, and I noticed that Chinese mills are buying iron ore at $20 more than the market price. So we can have good economic relations with China. We can have free speech here in Australia, just as long as we maintain our nerve, and I think the Australian government has shown that by giving Rabia Kadir a visa. I mean, after all, she's been here 3 times before. She can't be, not okay now when she was okay just recently as February when she was here.
But she is being given a much bigger platform. The film launch, she's speaking at the National Press Club in Canberra as well. Again, you must acknowledge that there's going to be some concern in Beijing about this and some potential for some risk to Stern Hu's case.
Well, Mr Sternhu should be released, in my view. I think there is only a chimera of charges against him. I think the International Secretary who was here claiming that he would be charged in Australia, I just say to him, why don't you show the Australian people the charges against Mr Sternhu? I don't think Mr Sternhu should be in jail, but that's a separate issue. We can't link letting people into Australia on the basis of who's acceptable to Chinese foreign policy with cases like Mr Sternhu, because we get into the slippery slope of them being able to manipulate us on a whole range of issues.
Okay,
and I think the Australian government, in a lot quieter way than me, has made that point by giving the visa.
You've just said, though, that you think Sternhu should be released. We haven't seen the evidence, and yes, the government has been demanding that case be expedited, but how do you know there's not evidence against Sternhu?
Well, first of all, I'm sorry, David, I have a different view than some people about legality in China. I think there is only a facade of legality in China. There is the rule of the Communist Party in China, and that supersedes all of the ostensibly legal system that they have over there. I think Mr Sternhu's crime was to compile commercial intelligence that any normal businessman would compile, and the fact that the iron ore prices got out of kilter, according to the Chinese government, is his real issue. But again, I say, if this was anywhere like a crime that could be seen in Australia, let the Chinese government release him. And they also have the ability to let him out on bail, even under the so-called legality in China. So if China wanted to be friendly to Australia, they could release Mr Sternhu on bail, but we certainly shouldn't be allowing this issue to be related to the other visitors or other bits of Australian foreign policy. I mean, what are we going to do next? Say that we're not going to go ahead with some of the aspects of the Defence White Paper that the Prime Minister raised because we're concerned about Sternhu's presence. All of these issues are separate and have got to be dealt with.
Just quickly, Michael Danby, why isn't the Foreign Minister, Stephen Smith, meeting Rabia Kadir if this is such an important issue?
Look, I think Ms Kadir's visa was given on the basis of her speaking to the opening of her film made by an Australian about her life, which will allow the Australian people to make some kind of objective assessment of her. It was not made on the basis, this visa, of her meeting the Foreign Minister. If she was to come here on another occasion for that purpose, then perhaps that would be appropriate. But you come for the purpose that your visa was given. All
right. Michael Danby, Labor MP from Melbourne. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
So clearly there are strong views on this particular visit, but as I say, the Foreign Minister won't be meeting her on this particular visit.
Okay, David, thank you.
David, thank you very much.